Alright, what's going on everybody, it's Liam here and welcome to today's video on the channel. And in today's video, I have a commentary for y'all and I will be helping you guys with the Voracious raid in Wizard101. Now, I've done this a little bit over 100 times, probably closer to 150 runs ever since it came out, half a year ago. And I've managed to obtain every single piece of gear from this raid, whether it's all the decks, amulets, rings, themes, pets, boots, robe, hat, wand. We got everything over here. Now the strategy has changed since my last raid guide. That's why I am updating it to this video. And also I would like to include a bit more, detail in this video as well. If you find this video useful at all, a like rating and a sub is always appreciated. But yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. So real quick, before we even get into the raid, I have a couple of disclaimers that I want to say. It's okay if you don't do great on your first try. As one of the first people who got access to raids, along with some other content creators, we got our butt kicked for the first couple of days, and honestly, it was a lot of fun. I will say that. I kind of miss it even now, even though it's only been like half a year. But it's okay to not, win on your first raid key, for example. Don't feel discouraged at all. It is meant to be difficult end game content and extremely rewarding when you get that win. Now, before we even get into the raid, the Vanguard players are going to need cantrips to be optimal. You can do it without cantrips, but it won't be as easy, and you'll probably be losing a little bit of time in the grand scheme of things. Now, to start the raid, all 12 players must cast Magic Touch on the portal. As you can see here on the gameplay in the background, I'll try to sync that up here with the audio as best as I can in this video. You just cast it, and personally I like to go up on the ramp a bit and just click in the middle. If that doesn't work for you, I'd recommend just clicking on the gate on the side there. That has worked for me as well and some other players. I'd recommend doing those two options. If you're still having issues with that, I'd recommend just trying to get a different angle on the portal. And I would recommend not being one of those people who are trying to snipe the gate from like 40 feet away, because it's very unrealistic. You're gonna hit that and you might be wasting energy, which is very important in this raid. Now, once you're in the raid, Vanguard team will need to stand on their 4 sigils and outside will need to stand on their 8 to open up the Vanguard side of things. Now, before we get into any more of the raid, I'm going to be discussing what roles are best to have on the Vanguard team, and that's where we're going to start. First of all is Vanguard. So role number 1, now this is my special role that I like to do, is the Storm Hitter. Now, I'll be throwing my deck on screen and I'll be showing you stats as well on screen. The Storm should have dual strike cantrips and restoring rain cantrips for the 2 side fights, depending on obviously who you get, right? If you get an ice, you can't blade, so you can't restoring rain. I'll be covering that a bit later on in the video. You guys will understand where and when to use those, but you'll definitely want those 2 mainly on a Storm Wizard. Next up, the fire support is gonna need to have a couple of things. Obviously, you're gonna want a healing cantrip and a donate pip 3 for the first fight. Again, I'll get into that a little bit later on. This will be the deck you want, and the stats you're gonna want is gonna be around, obviously, 180 damage with that cap at 183, and as high pierce as you can get, around the 55 ballpark. Now, the fire hitter, again, is probably going to have the exact same stats, but their deck is going to look a bit differently. Now, for the most part, the fires do the same thing until you get to the Nullity Fight, and that's when, you start to differentiate which player does what, essentially. Now, for the Jade player, it can be a life, a death, or a balance. Personally, I've had the most success with lives. I've, won raids, plenty of raids with balance and deaths, absolutely fine. But personally, the most reliable in my opinion is a life with a balance mastery. This will be the deck you want, and the stats roughly, we all know what a Jade needs for stats, just get your accuracy, resist, health, outgoing, and you're pretty much good to go, right? The Jade should have a healing cantrip to support, obviously, the hitter in case your hitter gets blown up at the end of the fight and you can't heal them, or obviously heal the fire people as well, potentially after the first phase. Now for the general rules of the raid, we'll be talking about the nullity a little bit later, but I'll be throwing up a graph on screen right now that you're going to want to be looking at. Now this graph is, I believe, from my friend Thunder on Discord. Shout out to Thunder. I'm using a lot of his images here in this video. He's helped me out a lot with raids. He, you know, in voice chat, he helps a lot of new players and leads them to victory. I appreciate you, Thunder. Thanks for everything you do for the channel. So yeah, as you can see here, it kind of tells you what to do with each one. So basically, right, fire, you cannot trap against a fire because fire counters that on the Rochambeau wheel. Ice counters blades, so you can't blade, so you have to trap. And I think you kind of get that theme going on here, but I'll just briefly cover it fast again. Fire, you can't trap, so you blade. Ice, you can't blade, so you trap. Storm and Myth, you can blade or trap because Storm counters overtimes like hots and dots, but you don't really do that in the raid. And Myth counters shields and weaknesses, but again, you don't really do that in the raid. Life counters traps, so you're going to do the exact same thing as a fire. You're going to blade, right? And at death, you cannot blade, so you have to trap. And with the balanced one here, you can blade or trap for the most part, but keep in mind, if you get your pips to 10 or 11, I think it's 11, I could be wrong, correct me in the comments on that. I believe it is 11 pips. You will get a weakness on every single player, so be wary of your pip costs and try to dump your pips before you obviously get 11 pips. So that's a very helpful thing to come back to in this video, is that graph. Personally, I didn't need it because I have a good understanding on how the Rochambeau works. If you want a bit more in-depth guide on how Rochambeau works, I have a guide here on the channel for y'all. So I'm going to briefly walk through each fight in the raid now with y'all. First fight you're gonna do is the one in the middle, which is the Jaguar. Now this fight has changed quite a bit actually ever since a couple of audits came through the past few months in this recent audit with Novus, I think, actually. But now what you're gonna want to do is you're gonna want your Jade to go in, pull the minion first, right? And then you're going to want one of the fires, ideally, to cast a Donate Pip 3, which gives you a Power Pip and a Noob Pip, I believe, before the round even starts. And what this will allow you to do is basically frenzy into a Storm Owl on a Storm, for example, and it'll allow your fires to frenzy and double Dragoon into another hit. So it's just a lot of burst damage, you know, it rushes things, speeds up the pace quite a bit, which is pretty nice. But yeah, you'll want the Jade just to bubble here and Elemental Dispel the boss fight on its first 2 rounds, ideally. Then all 3 of the hitters are going to frenzy, both fires are going to Dragoon spam, and then the Owl is going to, or sorry, the Storm is going to Owl with the frenzy out on round 2, and that should be enough to kill the boss. If not, then you can Sunbird and obviously hit again in this fight, and that's really all there is to it. And you're gonna want to call out that token right there. For us, it was a spider, and we're heading over to the right side, as you can see right here. Same thing, you're going to want your Jade to pull the minion first, and I'm actually casting a cantrip in because, again, balance, I can blade or trap against this guy, right? So I casted a blade in because, obviously, blades are pretty good on a Storm, right? Now, keep in mind, this fight, he is balanced, so I cannot go over 11 pips. I'm going to want to get my buffs up really fast and just get the hit out before I get weaknessed. Something to note on this fight is the boss is life, so that means he can counter your traps, but traps that do work are AoE traps, so we're looking at Windstorm, main deck on the pet there, as you see on my Jade Timothy, and obviously the mass trap from the Dragoon hat that I am running on my Storm Wizard. So even though he counters traps, you can stack up to 3 traps via the AoE traps, as you can see right here. Then yeah, that's pretty much all you do is just buff for 2 rounds and go for like a Lord Squall, Sirens, whatever you prefer. I use Lord Squall still, personally. I just like that. It works really good for me, and I have a lot of them. So, yeah, that's really all you gotta do for this side, and let's get on to the next fight. So for the next fight, you're obviously going to go on the right side, and then you are going to look and see what kind of minion you got. Now, when you see the minion you got, you're going to tell your outside team what fight to do. Now, this will either be Seraph or Brimstone. Now, keep in mind, if we go back to that graph there I showed y'all, if you have an ice, you're not going to want Seraph because you're not going to blade. You're not going to have blades since the ice will counter it, right? So you'll have to trap if it's an ice for the Gobbler Fight. So Brimstone specializes in traps. So if you see ice or death, tell your outside team Brimstone, get to trapping, and it'll be very, very helpful for your fight. And if it's the other way around, if you have a trap minion, I believe, you're going to want to blade stack and get Seraph and not Brimstone. Gobbler Fight can be a bit tricky. He can stun quite a bit, and he can also one-shot your Storm if he plays pretty good. So you gotta be a bit careful, and you might have to, you know, slow down for a round or two to heal and get your Jade to dispel potentially if, obviously, the Gobbler you are fighting is a Warlord. Now, for the fire on the left side, I don't have any gameplay of that right now. I apologize. I just don't like to play fire on the left side that much because it's kind of repetitive. I do like fire as a school, but it's just kind of boring in the raid in my opinion. Basically, as a fire on the left side, all you do, I'm pretty sure, is you just literally aura and then spam Dragoon and like Sunbird and maybe pack a Shad if you get a Shad, and that's literally all you do for the phase 1, and you do that for the Unfun guy on phase 2 as well. Literally just aura and get spamming. You can have a fire pack a bubble to obviously buff both of your hits. That works pretty well as well. But yeah, you just like aura bubble and then start spamming hits for the Badger and for the Unfun guy, and that's really all you have to do on a fire. So we've pretty much covered everything up to the Nullity Fight. Now, when you're at the Nullity Fight, you're gonna want to get everybody to be max health. You cannot use cantrips on this fight, unfortunately. It just doesn't work. First round, you are going to want to pass because you're basically literally stunned. You just can't do anything, right? So you just want to pass the first round, see what kind of minion you got, and then obviously look at the cheat he says at the top of the screen. Like the Nullity keeps it cool, the Nullity sees your doom, right? That's just a bit of like a punchline to tell you what kind of cheat he is, right? So doom is death, I think chill or cold is ice, right? Electrifying is storm, you know, yada yada. You know, legend is myth, life is alive. I think you guys will kind of get the hang of things. It's pretty self-explanatory, right? Now, the worst possible RNG you can have on this fight is have a blade or trap countering minion, and then the Nullity covering the other half, right? So let's say I have an ice minion, so I can't blade, but then the boss, right, the Nullity is a trap counter school. That's the worst possible thing to happen because you're going to take so much damage and you're just not going to be able to buff your hitters at all. So that is the worst possible case scenario. Now, your outside players are going to want to get your Surge and your Elf fight done relatively quick, ideally on the time where both of your fires Dragoon the minion. The minion will be about one shot and the Elf can clean it up, and then the fires can buff up the Storm, obviously, to kill the Nullity really, really quickly. Some players like to run Monumental as well, which would be a third fight on the outside. I wouldn't recommend doing this. I got, you know, over 100 raid wins without doing that. You don't need it at all, but it can be helpful if your outside team is pretty good and your Vanguard team needs a bit of help. So yeah, for this fight, you just have to really think on your feet and play as a team and try to think of, you know, the bigger picture on what's going on, right? You have a lot of runs where somebody's just gonna have to give up their life, whether it's the Jade or one of the fires. They're gonna have to like buff up the Storm and die because, you know, the bigger picture is to win. the fight before all of us get wiped out by the big power nova, right? So a lot of the time there'll be at least 1 or 2 casualties in the Nullity fight before you kill the Nullity. If you do get some good RNG though, a lot of players will not actually find themselves dying. But for the most part right now, I would say that I would at least expect 1 player to go down in the Nullity fight because it is a lot to deal with and take in. Something cool you can do on the second phase of the Nullity is, you know, if you kill the minion and you know what cheat the boss is, so let's say the boss is ice, right? I can actually call out to the outside to give us the Seraph or the Brimstone, right? So again, if he's ice, we're gonna trap stack. So we'll trap stack and say, hey, outside, can you get Brimstone? And outside can buff us as well in this fight. Again, I'd only recommend doing that though if you have a very competent outside team. If not, it's fine. You just have to play well on Vanguard and you'll be able to kill the Nullity pretty easily. So yeah, the objective of this fight is basically to kill the minion, right? Get hit by the Power Nova, and then you're gonna have to do a neutral move on the round where you don't know what he is after you get Power Nova'd, because he'll say something and you could mess up the entire run. So neutral moves are like Bubble, Aura, Heal, Pass, Strike. Those are the best moves on the round after beginning when you get hit with the Power Nova. And then simply from there, try to get your Jade to sustain the team, get the fires to buff up the storm, or obviously likewise other way around, and then just one-shot the Nullity and you should be fine. That's really all there is to it. A lot of, you know, Vanguard is just thinking on your feet, playing as a team, figuring out who has to be sacrificed for the greater good and stuff like that. But yeah, that's all I really gotta say about the Nullity fights. If you're not very confident with your ability to think on the feet, I would probably recommend just sticking to the outside. It is a lot more simple in general. Okay, now for the outside, again, I don't really have a lot of gameplay for this, but I have a couple of screenshots and I have a Google Docs that I can link and show in this video for our deck setups and stuff like that. Outside, you have players on drums. Now, these drum players, obviously, they have to manage a certain area, patrol a certain area. You have about 3 to 4 players doing the drums for your raid. I'll throw an image up on screen right now, what it's kind of going to look like on the map if you are a drummer player. This is what our guild does personally, I believe. Again, I don't do a lot of outside, but I think this is what is done. If you want to have a 4th drummer, in case you guys are not very confident, I'd recommend having a 2nd player in that middle part of the area. Now, as of this recent update, you actually do not need to have the outside do a fight on this first street, which is pretty convenient. So all you're going to want to do is get those drums done, find some power stars, throw them on the chest at a good time when your raid leader tells you to. And in general, on the outside, I believe you either do mana once and health twice, or you do mana twice and health once. I could be wrong. Maybe you do 2 and 2. Again, I don't have much experience with the outside, but I think it's more like mana once. Actually, no, I think it is mana twice and health twice, now that I think about it. But you have to be on that with an outside team. Now, when Vanguard tells you there are 3 symbols, obviously on the Jaguar on the left and the right, you'll be putting that into the code gate you see obviously on the giant gate. You'll put those in any order that will unlock. Now, right when that unlocks, assuming that you have the drums done, you can go ahead, get some stars, fill up that health chest. Be quick with this one though, it's a little bit buggy sometimes. And if you're a player that does outside fights, like, you know, Brimstone, like Seraph, stuff like that, you're going to want to go and get started on those fights right away. Right when your Vanguard team tells you which one, again, Brimstone or Seraph. Once you hit the green light to go and do that, you'll just go and simply do that fight as fast as possible to assist the Vanguard players. At this time as well, after you are done that fight, or other players obviously in the downtime between mana game being disabled and the health chest, you're going to want to find a pet token. So you'll be running around in pet mode around the raid. And there's a lot of spawns for this. There's a lot of ground to cover, but a lot of players can find it. It's typically in like the weird corners of the map. You're going to want to walk up to it and like push X, and you'll know when you get it because it'll literally just disappear. And then you can put it into the gate. Obviously, when your Vanguard tells you the 2 codes, the pet token is the 3rd. That will open access to the 3rd street. Now, again, your Vanguard team will tell you when to start your Surge fight and your Elf fight. Typically, this is the best way to optimally do it, is to start it right when the Vanguard tells you to. So by the time you finish that, the Vanguard can get it right when they are in the Nullity Fight. So get on that as soon as you can if you are the Surge and Elf player, right when your Vanguard team tells you to. It's basically either right before they finish the Gobbler and the Unfun guy, or right when they're finished both of them, you can start. It just really depends on your guild skill level, right? If you're confident with your Vanguard and you're outside, you could start the Elf and Surge a lot sooner before they're even done Unfun or the Gobbler Fight. But if you're not that confident, you could probably just wait until you get the loot for both of the second phases and then go and start Elf and Surge. Now from here, it's honestly pretty much a cakewalk. You have your mana team just do the mana team things, and when you're done, the fights like Surge, Elf, Monumental maybe, all players are just gonna go over to the last street, and now you're gonna pull a minion and then try to fill up one battle area with 4 minions and keep pulling that minion. Now, if you do this right with a lot of players, one player will kind of control one area and keep pulling a minion, and they'll obviously call out and say, hey, this guy got past, he's on the sidewalk, can you get that next guy? It's honestly pretty easy as long as all players are there and all players are coordinated and obviously being active and paying attention. It's honestly pretty hard to mess this part up. KingsIsle's pretty generous with this. Again, there's a lot of, combat battles along the way. I think there's like 8 or 9 mess ups you could potentially do. So like 8 or 9 times 4 of the battle. There's a lot of minions you can pull into, right? It's really not that bad. You could try killing them, like if you are one of the hitters on Elf or Surge, and honestly you can do that if you want to. It's really not that bad, but most people just fill up a portal, fill up a battle, and flee and repull and stall the timer to 30 seconds. That's what most people do. If you let the minions get to the end, they will actually join the Nullity Fight, which can really increase the chances of having a really bad run. I've had minions join and we've won on the Nullity Fight, but if you're having a bad Vanguard run, like a lot of bad RNG for example, and then you let a minion get through, that can be the make or break of a run. So just really try to not let any minions through that portal. Again, it's not that hard. You just, each battle area, assign one player to that. They're responsible for pulling 4. Call out if one doesn't get in your battle for the next player, and just keep doing that pattern on and on. And yeah, that's all you'll really do for the outside. You'll get your loot once Vanguard is successful on that. And after you are done your raid run, just simply shift home and go right back to the portal, pop an energy elixir if you're on Vanguard, and just go right back in and keep doing it. And yeah, I hope this video helped y'all out a lot. It was a longer video. I do apologize for that, but it has to be done. And again, like rating is always appreciated, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching this far, and take care, guys.